Right then, this is the first of a three-part series on macronutrients, or macros as they're called. First up, the gym bros' favourite, protein. So I'm going to go into a bit about how much protein we need, because that's one of the questions that I get asked all the time, especially from people that are just starting out in the gym. But before I get to that, what is protein? We see it everywhere at the moment. It's all over food packets as well as protein shakes and bars. But what is it and what does it do? So protein is incredibly important, and without it our body would be in a bit of a mess, and our health would suffer greatly. So proteins are an essential nutrient for our bodies and can be broken down into 20 building blocks known as amino acids. And from these 20 amino acids, 9 of them are considered to be, or known as, essential. And this just means that the body can't synthesize or produce them on its own. So we need to get these from our food, animal and plant sources. And the other 11 amino acids can be synthesized and reproduced by the body. So these are known as non-essential. Protein quality is something to consider, but before I go on, I just want to say that I'm talking about protein from food here, not protein bars and shakes and powders. Now, what I often see is people that are new to the gym and just started exercising or training, they rush out and buy these expensive protein powders and shakes when you really don't need to. You can get all of your protein from your food, and it's better from your food than it is from the powders and the shakes. Where shakes do come in handy is that they're good if you're short on time and you're struggling to meet your protein targets, which I'll talk about targets in a minute. But seriously, you don't need to rush out and buy these expensive protein powders. You can get everything you need and probably a better quality from your food. So when we're talking about protein quality in food, there's a thing called the biological value of protein, and I don't need to go into it too much, but basically it rates the foods and the proteins and divides them up into complete and incomplete proteins. A complete protein contains all of the 9 essential amino acids that your body needs that it can't synthesize itself. Now these can be found in things like eggs, chicken, milk, soybeans, beef and quinoa, to name a few. And incomplete proteins, which don't contain the 9 essential amino acids, are things like grains, legumes and cereals. Now if you're mix and matching your food, your protein foods, then you don't really need to worry about this too much. The only time it's a concern is if you are on a vegan or vegetarian diet, and even then you don't need to supplement. You can just mix and match certain incomplete proteins and it produces a complete protein. So I will cover that in a separate post. I'll do a thing on sort of plant-based vegan and vegetarian diets. But for now, if you're mixing and matching your protein sources in your food, then it's something you really don't need to worry about too much. Now, what does protein do? What's its role within the body? Now, like I said at the start, protein provides the building materials, the amino acids that are required for growth and repair of body tissues. And that's the kind of function that most people know about. So if you ask anybody, especially somebody that goes to the gym, what does protein do? The usual answer is going to be it helps build or repair your muscles. Now, while that's true, it also helps build and repair things like your skin, your nails, your hair, your teeth and bones. But building and repairing is not the only thing that protein does. Proteins facilitate numerous chemical reactions and act as chemical messengers that regulate body processes like your blood sugar levels. They fight things like foreign disease-causing substances in your body, so they help protect you against disease. Proteins move the required nutrients that your body needs in and out of cells and around your body, and it's also used as energy. There's 4 calories per gram of protein, and that's the same as a carbohydrate. But when you compare that to fat, which is 9 calories per gram, you can see why we encourage a lower fat diet, especially when you're trying to reduce body fat. And that's not because if you eat fat, it turns into fat and stays as fat in your body. It's because if you think about it, if you're trying to reduce your calorie intake but not feel hungry, then you go for something that's less calorific. So you go for carbohydrates and proteins, which are 4 calories per gram as opposed to 9 calories per gram of fat. So how much protein do we need? So the recommended average intake for somebody who is not seeking to make any changes in their body composition is around about 1 gram of protein per kilogram that they weigh. But there's two circumstances when you need to think about increasing your protein intake. Now, the first one that a lot of people know about is muscle growth. So it makes sense that you need to up your protein levels when you're trying to grow your muscles. But what a lot of people don't realize is that you also need to increase your protein level when you're trying to lose body fat. Now, this is because if you put yourself in a calorie deficit, so you're burning more calories than you're eating in a day, it's easy for your body to end up burning muscle tissue instead of or as well as fat, which is something that we definitely don't want. So when you're in a calorie deficit and you're trying to diet or lose body fat through dieting, then you really want to increase your protein intake to around about 1.2 to 1.5 grams of protein per kilo of body weight that you weigh. Now, as I mentioned before, you've also got to increase this when you're trying to build your muscle mass. So around about 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilo of body weight is the kind of target that you need to get to. And the elderly is much the same as the average person. It's just 1 gram per kilo of body weight. Now, when I mention this to people, they start freaking out, thinking, how the hell can I work out how much protein and how many grams of protein there are in my food that I'm eating, and how do I calculate this on a daily basis? But it's not really that hard. All you need to do is track your food with MyFitnessPal for the period of time that you're chasing your target, whether that's muscle growth or fat loss. When you enter an ingredient into MyFitnessPal as part of your meal, you can just do that by scanning a barcode on the packet of whatever food you're eating, and it instantly works all the calories and the macros, the protein, carbohydrates and fats, out all for you. So there's not really anything you need to do, just scan and track. The dangers of a high protein diet. There ain't any. Listen, the only reason I'm mentioning this is because there's quite a few articles kicking around the internet trying to point the finger and link high protein diets to things like coronary heart disease or liver and kidney damage. But you just need to know that none of these are backed by accurate research, and everything that I have given you today is based on the official recommendations of your protein intake and requirements, and all of these are backed by proper peer-reviewed studies. So don't worry about what you read on the internet. Just stick within the guidelines that I've given you and you'll be absolutely fine. So the last thing to really talk about is our protein sources and where we can get it from. So starting here, I've got a small list of examples of animal protein sources. So things like tuna, chicken, turkey, lamb, duck, pork chops. Just a few examples of where you can get good quality protein from in animal sources. Now the numbers next to them are just the examples of roughly how many grams of protein you will get per 100 grams of weight in that food, in that certain food. And the next list here, as you'll see, is just plant and dairy protein sources. So things like peanut butter, peanuts, tofu, fried eggs, cheese. And again, I've just put roughly how many grams of protein you will get per 100 grams of that food. So I hope that gives you a better understanding of protein and what it does within our body. Like I say, the two scenarios that you want to think more carefully about your protein intake is one, when you're trying to lose fat, because when you're in a calorie deficit, if you're in too sharp a calorie deficit, there's a danger that your body will burn muscle as well as or instead of fat, and we definitely don't want that. And the second is when you're resistance training or weight training to gain muscle size and strength. So I will put a link in the post below this video to the slides so you can download all that information. And if you have any questions at all, just pop them in the comments box or get in touch.